Hello and welcome to Fearless DIY Music. My name is Tristan Lass and today is part 2 of our pedal build series. We are making a distortion pedal based upon the Electro circuit with my own tweaks. In the first episode, if you're seeing this video before watching the first one, in the first video we populated our chassis and we put some knobs on. And in this video, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be wiring the chassis. So we're going to make every connection inside of this pedal that we can without the circuit board present. So I have to remember, and I hope I do remember, I'm going to be taking pictures of the gut shot as I put every couple wires in. Because that's the whole point of this video, is I want to show kind of each wire as it goes in, and as I'm doing it, I'll explain what that wire is up to, what it's doing. So let me make sure that I have my phone ready to go here so I can take pictures. Alright, so I've never really seen too many videos where it actually shows in real time people building a pedal. So that's the whole point of this series. If you're not interested in that sort of thing, maybe you don't want to watch this video. But I hope you are interested, and I hope that other people, maybe get curious enough about this circuit to go ahead and make one of their own. Right now, I just turned on my little exhaust fan. This is just a computer fan mounted to a piece of wood with a 9-volt battery. That is blowing. It's going to suck the solder smoke away from me, hopefully, so I'm not breathing it in like I was in the amp switcher pedal video. So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to get started. I have a basic list here of process. So we're going to start with live wires. So I'm going to start with my input jack, and the input, basically doing the tip to the middle lug of our foot switch. So I have some wire pre-cut here. Hopefully my soldering iron is ready to go, and let's get started. All right, so we're going to attach one end of this wire to our input jack, and we're attaching it to the lug that is the tip lug, the one furthest back towards the side of the chassis. Alright, I'm trying to get the wire so it'll stay in place while I solder it. I'm going to try to make this as clean as possible. A lot of times I do get into a rushed state of being while I'm doing this, or I get a little frantic and I just start slapping things together, and I'm really going to try not to do that in this video. Alright, our first connection. So now we're going to attach that wire to the middle lug of our triple pole dual throw foot switch. So that's going to take the live signal from the input jack and put it into the common lug of our foot switch. Okay. A quick note on the wire I'm using. What is this? This is actually wire that's meant for like pet fences. It just happens to be the perfect gauge, and it's a stiff wire. It's a solid core wire, copper, and I find it very easy to work with pedals. Alright, so now we're going to solder that in. There we go. And wire number 1 is done. I will take a quick picture of that. Boom. Whoops, I'm going to leave my camera up. Alright, next up. So my idea here is, and now I'm going to follow the signal to bypass. So I've got a piece of spare wire here. We're going to join the bottom lug of the input side of the foot switch to the bottom lug of the output side. And that way, my computer just made a little noise, and then that way we should be able to pass signal. when we're done today, we'll test it and make sure that our bypass is working. Okay, so I just made a little loop of wire. I've attached that to those two bottom lugs for our bypass. Now let's go ahead and get those soldered in. There we go. And there we go. Alright, we'll check those. And I'm bending that down just to keep it out of the way. Our circuit board will be going down here in the bottom of the pedal. Okay, I'm not going to bother to take a picture of that. We're going to go ahead and go, our common output will go to the outer contact point on our jack. Let's go ahead and get this part wired into the foot switch first. There's a little bit more wire than I want hanging out there. Snip that off. Put that into the lug. And we'll solder that connection. Okay. We have that in. And now we'll take it to our jack. Alright, we'll cut off our excess wire. Looks like that'll be about enough right there. Trim that off. Now we're going to put it down to our jack, to the output. Alright, let's spin that up. It'll stay in place a little bit better. And go ahead and make sure that that's nice and exposed so we can solder it. Nice and clean. Make sure my fan's doing what it's supposed to do here. Okay, it's a good looking solder. So, we now have the ability, I should be able right now at this point, we should be able to bypass signal. We're not going to test that right now, but we know that that's how that's going to work. All right, so now what I want to do is, we're not going to do all our ground wires at the moment. We're just going to continue working on our foot switch. And I'll take a quick picture here of our bypass signal wiring. Oh, I want to keep my camera pulled up. I'll keep doing that probably. Okay, so next up, now where are we going to route this? We're going to route this top lug. When the foot switch is engaged, that's going to go to our main circuit. So we don't want to solder that point because that wire will be coming off of our circuit board. So I think our next step is to go ahead and put our resistor to our positive on our LED. I have a 22K resistor here. We're going to do the top middle lug over to our LED. And that's going to be our next step. I'll go ahead and get this sized out and trimmed. And we'll solder that in. Whoops. And you know, this stuff is fiddly. Trying to do a balancing act here. Probably be easier if I did it like that. There we go. But I want to make sure that we actually have that through the lug hole. And that's another thing to make sure that your wires and your components are actually in the lugs. You can get away with doing a surface solder on something. Whoops. You can get away with doing a surface solder on something like that. It's really not the best. Okay. Make sure that resistor took. We have clean solder on that. Now we're going to solder that over to our LED. The resistor, of course, is there so it doesn't blow our LED up. You know, straight 9 volt into an LED. The LED will light for a moment, and then that moment will pass quickly. Your positive on your LED is going to be the longer of the two little legs that stick out of it. And that's what I'm doing right now, is doing the resistor to the LED positive, because this is going to be how it lights up. This is our power supply. Okay. We have a good solder there. We are in. I'm happy with that. All right. Next up, we are going to do our power supply to the LED. Now, that for now is just going to hang out. We will not connect that yet because there will be a common power supply on our circuit board that will power the board and the LED. This will be just our connector to that power source when we get to it. But we're not there yet. Okay. So we're going to let this wire just hang out. We know that's going to be our power wire. Okay. For the LED. All right, for now, I'm just going to tuck that down in there. We know what that's for, and we'll take a picture. Okay, next up, we are going to go ahead and wire our power supply jack. We'll do both the negative, or we're going to do the ground, and we're going to do the live wire. All right. The ground for our power jack is going to be coming out of our middle lug of our input jack. Or wait. That is the ground. Okay, yes. Okay, so the ground for our power jack is coming off the middle lug of our input jack. Just want to make that clear. Middle lug is the ground for the power supply. All right. We have that soldered in. And now we're going to run that to our ground, which is the big L-shaped one on these pedal power supplies. So it's the L-shaped lug. This is where we're headed. And that will ground our power supply. Okay. We'll go ahead and get that in. All right. Now we are going to be wiring our PTB, our passive treble bass circuit, and that will be coming. But first, I think I want to go ahead and get my volume pot wired. So for the volume pot, our input to the volume pot will be the common output from our PTB circuit. Let me go ahead and take a picture of this. Okay, and we'll get into more detail on that, but we are using a push-pull pot. So our output from our push-pull pot will be going to the volume. The push-pull pot will either bypass the circuit, our tone circuit, or it will have the tone circuit engaged. Regardless, our common out of the push-pull is going to be going to the input of the volume pot. So let's go ahead and get that wire in. So we're going from the input of our volume pot to the common out of our push-pull. Okay, there we go. Let's get that soldered in. That looks good. And that's going to go over to our common output from our push-pull. Okay. And it looks like we have a little bit of old solder. I have used this push-pull in another application at one point, so there is a little bit of old solder there. Hopefully that will not be an issue. And we can get this to slide in. Okay, whoops. Not quite. I may have to surface solder this one, which is okay. Like I said, it's not ideal in some circumstances, but in this circumstance it'll be alright. I'm having a heck of a time with that. Alright, there we go. Let's check that. Nope. It did not have the desired result. Okay, I'm just holding it there to make sure that we get a good connection. I'm going to look down in there and make sure that everything looks nice and tight. Yes. Alright, so we got that taken care of. So we have our output from our push-pull going to our volume pedal, to our volume input. Alright. Now, our next step from there is we're going to do our volume output to the third lug of our foot switch output side. The top one on the output side. I keep putting things into the fan, which is pretty ridiculous. And let's go ahead and get this one in. Okay. Sure, I've got my wire nice and clean. I don't have any weirdness going on here. And let's make sure that's got a full good solder on it. Okay, I'm going to check that to make sure it's fully connected, and it is. Alright, so this is going to loop around and go into that. And go into our output, our circuit output on the foot pedal. On the foot switch, I should say. Okay. So now we've got that coming up here, and I'm kind of leaving a big loop on this one because we're going to have to get in there to put our tone capacitor in for our base circuit, our base potentiometer in our PTB circuit. So I'm going to need a little bit of wiggle room down in there. And now that I think about it, maybe I should have done that first, but I want to err on the side of kind of doing the basic wiring, because most of the problems you have with a pedal when you turn it on and it doesn't work comes from the basics. It comes from this, it comes from the switch, and then it's going to come from your jacks not being wired right. Okay, so I think I'm going to go ahead and put a live wire into my power jack just to have that done. And it's just going to hang out like my other power wire down here for the LED is. Really want to make sure we're not crossing anything. So you want to use the top jack or the top lug on your DC power supply, your AC power supply, I should say, the 9-volt power supply jack. You want to put that in the top lug, and then the L-shaped lug is your ground, and then you would use the middle lug if you were going to go ahead and have a 9-volt battery involved. I don't use 9-volt batteries in any of my pedals, so but if you wanted to have it there, you could. All right, next up, let's see here, bypass and live wires. Let's check everything out. We know that that's going to be coming from the circuit board. I got to remember all my ins and outs here. Input from the circuit board, output, yeah. Input from the circuit board. Yes. So that's going to be, circuit board will go to that, and that will go to that. Okay. Oh, now my brain is melting. Okay, it's too soon for my brain to melt, especially not on camera. So now next, I think that what I'm going to do is, I'm just thinking about how the passive treble bass circuit, there's going to be an input coming from the board. That one will go to the, okay, so yeah, that one goes to that, and then the return will come back through there. Yes, that is correct. All right, I haven't lost my mind. So can I go ahead and wire that then? That's the next question. So from the circuit board, we're coming to there, and then it'll go out to our treble. Yeah, so I think that next up we will do the passive. We'll go ahead and start the PTB process. Okay, so we're going to have a wire coming out of our top right-hand lug of our push-pull, and that's going to go to the input of our passive treble bass circuit. We're just going to go ahead and get that done. Alright, so when the input from the circuit board goes to the common and the push-pull is depressed, it will send the signal through this wire to go to our passive treble bass circuit. Alright. Once again, I left myself room with that wire so that I can get to this one. Okay. Are we good? That looks like a really good solder. Okay. So now, I'm now looking at our passive treble bass circuit. I'll take a picture of that particular part of the schematic. That is where we are at the moment. Okay, I'm going to take a picture of where we're at with our general wiring. Okay. Alright, so now we're going to get into it. I may end up going a little further with this passive treble bass. I might just start rolling with it at this point. Let me look at my orientation. So I am going to that lug with this wire to our outer lug, what would be called, I mean, depending on perspective, I guess it's lug number 1. We're going to be going there first. Lug number 1, isn't this a lot of fun? Okay, so lug number 1 for that wire, and then we're going to be putting a capacitor in, our 0.022, which is this one. We'll go to the middle lug and then get grounded to the pot. And then we will have a ground wire coming off of the pot that will be headed towards the chassis when we get into all of that fun stuff coming up. Okay. Now part of me wishes I would have used smaller capacitors, but these are really good capacitors and should give us better parts tolerance values. So I'm going to do that. I think that will be okay. I'll bend it up. Get out of the way of that power jack a little bit. You're always playing, you know, a little bit of twister when you're making a pedal, and it's just the way it is. Alright, I'm going to bend that capacitor up a little bit. Whoops. Yikes. Alright, that wire going into my fan is not a good thing. Alright. I'm going to actually trim a little bit more of that capacitor wire off. Get it over to there. Now, the treble pot is going to need a ground wire. So we're going to go ahead and solder that in. Need a long piece of wire for that. We're going to solder that in. Well, actually, I'm not going to solder that in yet because I'm going to be doing a chassis ground here in a little bit, and I think that I have designated where are my notes. Treble pot is going to the chassis, so we are actually not going to ground that just yet because I'm not sure how long the wire is going to be. All right, so now we need an output wire from our treble pot, which comes out of the same lug that we put the input wire into, and that will be heading to our base control. So right now I'm putting in the input and the output wires, and we're going to solder those up. And what I'm going to have to do here, I'm going to move this jack that I put in. Is interfering a little bit with that connection. It's not totally interfering with it, but it's enough for me to go. I'm just going to spin it so that it's going the other direction so that we don't have any issues going forward. Oh, come on now. Seriously, is this where I'm going to get caught on this? All right. Okay, this is going to be tricky. I'm just going to have to do this. That all unsoldered. That distance out. Now what's happened to me here is I have made a stupid mistake and I'm paying for it on camera. I had this jack too close to the pot, and as a result I have soldered my treble circuit to my jack, and that's just driving me crazy. Alright, is that done now being silly? Yes, it is done now being silly. Alright, so we're going to turn that so that we have no more issues with that happening again. We'll tighten it back down and we'll check our solders on our ins and outs to the treble potentiometer. I apologize, but like I said, it's kind of the risk you take doing this the way that I'm doing it. But hopefully it's of interest, and it shows that, hey, we're all human. We all, you know, we all do the best we can. And I'm just bending this, make sure I have no interference. Alright, so our treble pot is essentially wired. Now we need to go to our base pot. So this output from the treble is going to bridge the first and second lugs of our base circuit. So, and we're going to have a capacitor in there that goes from 1 to 3. And that's kind of the whole deal for this one. So, I'm going to put this wire, let's get this wire out of the way, and I did leave myself enough room to be able to get to these things. Because down here on this particular potentiometer, things are a little tight. Okay, that looks good. All right, so I am now soldering the output from the treble potentiometer to the middle lug of our base potentiometer. Okay, take a look at that, make sure that that is looking solid, which it is. Okay, so next up, we've got our base cap, which is a 0.0022, and we're going to put that from lug 1 to lug 3, and we'll have an output wire coming from that going up to there, a really short one. So let me take a quick picture where we are at. Might take one, you can see a little bit more what's happening on that push pull. Have a little drink here. All right, so got our common coming out from our treble to our base. We're going to be putting a capacitor in those two lugs. Right now though, before we do that, go any further, I am going to go ahead and wire the output of the base pot to the push-pull circuit, so that is just done, and it'll be a lot easier for me. All I have to do then is just solder that capacitor in, and we will be good to go. I'll have everything put in their lugs ready to go. And then, aside from the grounding of our treble pot, we're pretty much there. Does that have solder in it? It shouldn't. No, it doesn't. Good. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and solder that in. Whoops. Hands are shaking. Silliness. Can't have my hand shaking while I'm doing this part. Okay, did I get it? Nope. Did that time. Alright. Okay, is that it? Yes, it's very solid. Alright, excellent. So now I'm going to run that down to lug number 3 on the base pot. And we're going to have to get that down there. And into our lug hole. Like I said, I toyed around with the idea. I thought about going ahead and having most of this, the passive treble base circuit, wired before being on camera. And part of me wishes I kind of had done that. Then again, this isn't too bad, and I hope it's not too painful to watch. But now I'm going to get my cap, which will finish, except for the ground to the treble pot, this will finish our treble base, or PTB circuit. Through there. Maybe I'll just go ahead and get that side done first. Like I said, this is all a little bit fiddly down in here. Like I said, part of me wishes that I had done this. Okay, no, actually I nailed it. But the tricky part is getting the solder in there, because this is going to be tight. Now I don't want to burn any of my good wires that I have already done. Oh wow, did I nail that first shot? Sure looks like it. Alright, now I also need to look underneath and make sure that we're not grounding out to chassis on any of these connections too. That's another critical thing. If you have solder that decides to drip and then connect one of your pots to the chassis, that can be one of the most frustrating things when you're making a pedal, to try to track that down. Okay. Feeling pretty strong here. This is going to be super tight though. Let's see here, what's happening with that? Oh, okay. Optical illusion. Alright, how do I want to get to that one? That's going to be tough. Let's get that out of the way. Let's get that out of the way. Alright, I think I have my in. Yeah, I've got my in. Alright. Like I said, I gave myself enough play on some of these wires to be able to do this. Alright, throw this. Need to have something up here to hold this. Here, let's use my wire spool. Hold this steady while I get in there. And if I can get this solder connection done, this is kind of the, this is going to be one of the hardest of the whole thing. Okay. How does that look? Is that wire in there? I always go through with my little tester here, make sure things are tight. Is my capacitor tight? Yes. Do I have any solder bleeding out underneath? No. Alright. So we're getting close here to the end. Well, wait, maybe not. Sitting here going, I'm getting all confident. Okay. We also have our hard soft clipping switch too as well, which we need to think about, because that's going to be coming off the circuit board. But we are going to need a ground. I think that we don't wire that till we wire. Yeah, we don't mess with that until we get to our actual wiring on the circuit board and get our circuit board installed. So our hard and soft we're going to leave alone for now. It does have a hard ground, but that hard ground is going to be going to the circuit board. It's not going to be going to the chassis. Alright, so now ground wires. I have an entire sheet of ground wire guidance here. So let's go through. I'll take a picture of that. I'll take a picture of our pedal now as it's coming to life. Okay, so we have our bypass now for our treble, or our PTB, our passive treble bass circuit. It should bypass, and it should be putting that tone control into the circuit, and the only connection I have left to make there is for the input from the circuit board, and I have plenty of room with that capacitor pulled back. So we are good. We're looking clean. We're looking strong. But we still have to do that ground wire. Alright, LED goes to chassis, and the treble pot goes to chassis. So we're going to do our 2 chassis grounds next. So, for the chassis grounds, let's see if this is going to be long enough. That should be long enough. Maybe not if we do that. So what I do for a chassis ground, sometimes, you know, you can theoretically ground everything to a ground. You could ground everything to your jack, you know, your input jack or whatever. I kind of like to have multiple grounds for different purposes. I want to have the treble pot on this circuit not be attached in any way to the circuit board or the input or output jacks, because I don't want any interference. I know that theoretically that won't happen, but I've had strange things happen when I don't like do these kind of due diligence things with grounds. So what I'm going to do here is I'm taking two wires. I'm going to twist them real well. And then I'm going to do a little dab of solder on them. Just to make sure they've got a good connection. My little fan. My fan does help. It helps me not breathe quite as much crap. And then what I'm going to do is I use a little automotive connector here. And that's actually a little too robust with the solder. Bring that down a hair. There we go. There we go. There we go. All right. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this little automotive connector on there. Look in there. Make sure that my wires look like they're good and connected in. Then I will crimp that on. Well, that did not go as planned, or did not attach as well as I'd hoped. Let's see here. Is that just too... Oh no, I got it this time. Alright. New connector, new day. We're going to crimp that on. So that's why I had an extra. I knew that was going to happen. So what I'm doing here is I want to make sure that that ground wire is good and tight. We have that nice little connector there. We're going to bend that up to a right angle. And we're going to drill a hole. And we're going to put it in over here on this side, I believe. Well, we got a lot of room over here too. You know what, actually I'm going to put it over here. And we're going to do the ground to the treble and the ground to the LED off of that. So here we go. We're going to use our handy drill with our conical bit again. You know what, no, we got the hard clip over there. I'm going to go ahead and stick with my gut and put it right here. Okay. Just putting my metal shavings on the floor because I'm trying to not take too much time to do this stuff. And I've got a screw and a nut here. And what's going to happen is we're going to attach this chassis wire to there. And like I said, I'm being a little bit, this might be a little bit of overkill. It makes me feel better. And it lets me know too that I just really don't have to think about those two ground connections ever again. And I know where they go. And I know that they're going to be solid. And you don't want to be messing with your LED. And you don't want to be messing with, you know, just a simple ground on a passive treble control, you know. So let's see here. I'm going to take this ground wire. And I'm going to kind of hide it. And that's the other thing too. I know that with this wire, I shouldn't have to go after it again, you know? You know what I mean? So I'm hoping that I can just, you know, come in here. We're going to hide it and not ever have to think about it again. And I know that it's solid and it's not connected. We're going to have weird interactions with other things. It's just a simple ground for a passive treble control, and we don't want to have to think about it. We just want it to be done. Okay, so that's what I'm doing right now. I'm doing the other end of the capacitor for our treble control to this chassis ground wire. So we're going to get that in there. I want it to go underneath my capacitor connection so I can use the the torque of the capacitor. It's already connected on one side. You can use the torque of that to hold that wire in place, hopefully, while I do the pot solder, the ground solder to the pot, which is always, that's always a little fraught, you know. Actually, did I do that too well? Get down there. No, get underneath it. There we go. That's what I want to see. Alright, so now, alright, that's good and clean. Alright, so now we want to get that soldered onto the pot. We'll take another picture and we'll continue on with our ground wire journey, which is a whole other thing, you know. It's a whole gnarly and absolutely critical thing. One of the biggest mistakes you can make, like I said earlier, is that if you don't have your ground situation figured out, you might as well just quit, you know, because it can very quickly be the main problem of your entire pedal build, will be the ground wires. Okay, I'm just moving some wire around in here so that it's clean and I can see everything and nothing is dragging on the bottom of the chassis. Alright, we got a ground wire in for that treble pot. Our other ground wire is just going to give me a shorty that goes right over here to our LED. Because I don't want to play around with, I keep my LEDs pretty well isolated from everything, you know. I don't want to be messing with that. All right. I don't like having it integrated to, I mean, obviously I've got the power interrupter, the live wire in the middle part of our foot switch. You know, that has to be there. But as far as wiring it, having anything to do with chassis, I don't want to have that going on. Alright. My soldering iron did contact that wire right there, which is a super bummer. And it kind of compromised the shielding. Now we can, I wonder if there's enough wire on there to be able to make it. Well, is that actually compromised? I'm going to do a little trick that I use sometimes. I'm going to grab some super glue, a piece of wire, and I'm just going to repair that shielding with super glue. It's barely an issue. It's not an issue, but I don't want to take any chances. So, and I may even put a little bit more super glue over that. I mean, the wire is barely showing, but that's what that shows you though. With one slip of the old soldering iron, things can go south a little bit. All right, and we're going to keep that just so it's completely floating, so it's not touching anything. All right, I think it's a good time to pause and take another picture. Our LED is wired, and if we put the 9-volt power supply on it, we should see it light up when it's not in bypass mode. All right, let's take a picture of that. Boop. All right, and I know this video is starting to get long, but guess what? This is kind of the longest part of the process, is taking your time and really looking at everything as you're doing the chassis. Because if you do the chassis wrong, you're screwed. You really are. All right, ground wires. We've got, I'm going to check things off actually. I need a pencil. All right, let's check stuff off. We've got our LED grounded. We have our treble pot grounded. Okay. Everything that grounds to the board, the 1K pot and the hard clip, we're not going to do those. All right, our power supply is grounded. So we got our middle lug, yes. So, board, volume pot. Oh, those are, okay, I see. Those are going to the inner. Got it. All right, so the volume pot and the board are going to be coming out of this. So we can go ahead and put 2 ground wires on our inner sleeve of our input jack. One will be going to our circuit board, and one will be going to our volume pot as the whole ground. So let's go ahead and get these in. Alright, if I was a smart man, I would do what I'm going to do now. I'm going to twist these together, and it'll just make it easier for me to get them into the jack and get a good nice solder on them. I haven't been labeling any wires yet, and that's because at this point I'm not quite ready to. All the wires on the circuit board will be labeled because they're going to be the ones that kind of finish everything off. Alright, I want both of you in there, not just one of you, both of you. There we go. Is that clean? Oh, it was until I put the wire into the fan again. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. Alright, why is this being so persnickety? There we go. That is perfection, which is what we want. Our inner sleeve lug from our input jack is now wired. This wire, alright, so we are going to start labeling things. That is a ground wire. This is going to volume. Okay, so we're getting ready to go to volume. We're going to move all these other wires out of the way. And we're going to strip this out pretty far so that we can run just a single wire through our ground lug on the volume control directly to the pot. And that way it just really holds itself in, you know. Okay, once again, want to make sure that we're not getting a bunch of stuff in the way. Whoops. See, and I say that, and I got hung up on my LED. So now I have to go back and clean up my LED, which is fine. Alright, so we got that there. Alright, we're all good. That was no biggie. Okie dokie. So, I'm going to go ahead and pull this wire through my volume pot. We're going to solder it to the lug first. Okay, got our lug soldered. Now we're going to solder the other end of the wire to the pot, which is done. We're going to move that down, which will also put pressure on it to let me know if I got a solid solder there. Solid solders all around. Yay! Input and output for the volume control. Yay! Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of my handy 1/4-inch jacks just to test everything, make sure I'm not grounding out against chassis, which I'm not. Check my input jack. I got nothing grounding out weird there, which is excellent. So we got a ground wire here. That'll be going to the board. We are going to start labeling things. I use this binding tape for this sometimes, because usually I'm just going to be cutting off the end of the wire anyway. So for this one, we're just going to call that ground, which is the universal ground symbol. We know that's a ground. flagged, ready to go. This is our, okay, so now we got our power in for our LED, and then this is the power supply. So what we could theoretically do right now is we could hook those up, take a look and see if our LED lights when we're out of bypass. And I think I may go ahead and just do that real quick. And we need to have a power supply anyway. So let's go get a 9-volt. We're gonna just, before I go get it, we'll strip this and we'll see what that's all about. That didn't take long. All right, let's plug this in. Let's put this into our power supply and let's see what happens. Oops. I got nothing, huh? Oh, there's no jack in. That's why. Gotta have your jack in for a connection. And we have a light. And then when we go to bypass, we don't have a light. Light, light. So we are on the right track. Let's take, I'm going to hold up the pedal to the camera, trying to think if there's anything else. So the board and the volume pot are done. So now the hard clip and the 1K pot and then a universal ground to the board itself is all we have left. And then we have our power supply for our board, and then we have our power supply for our LED. So that's all we have hanging out. And we'll remember all that, right? Right. So at this point, we do have a functioning LED. We have our bypass signal. I should be able to plug this into an amp and have bypass signal pass through it. I know that it will. I'm not going to take time right now on camera. I am going to take a quick picture of where we are at right now. Our chassis is essentially done. We have our volume pot wired. We have our passive treble bass circuit wired. We have our foot switch wired. We have our LED functioning and wired. All we have left to connect is we have to connect the input from the board, or the output to the board right there. Input, output to the board, output from the board is going to go right here, and then this voltage control is just straight to board and doesn't connect with anything else. So our jacks, our pots, for the most part, everything is done. And I apologize for this video being so long, but we did it. And we've got, I got bypass signal, and we have a functioning LED. And that's it for now. All right, next video, we will be building the circuit board itself and maybe installing it, but I doubt it. I'm going to keep the video short. We're just going to do the circuit board, get it buttoned up, have all of our wires labeled so that all we're doing when we do the final assembly is sticking the circuit board in and running a few wires and being done with it. All right. Well, thank you so much for watching. If you've watched up to this point, I would appreciate a like and a subscribe and a share. If anybody is audacious enough to be building this pedal along with me, please post, share, get in the comments, tell me what I'm missing. I am going to have pictures up of all the schematics and things like that so that you can't follow this mess completely, but I just kind of want to show the process of wire by wire. All right, you take care, and we'll see you next time with the circuit board.